What happens when a loyal employee with 19 years of service gets fired in 30 seconds? Right during recovery from a hospitalization, the supervisor thought it would go without a trace. But one little entry left the courtroom speechless. You know what started my crappiest day in the last 20 years? A donut. Yes, yes, a regular warm cinnamon donut that I idiotically bought on my way to work to treat my coworkers to in honor of my return. Back from sick leave, after spinal surgery. After 3 weeks where getting out of bed was a feat, not just a morning routine. I stopped by the very coffee shop on the corner, where the staff already knows I don't take anything with strawberries because I almost choked once. Picked up the box, paid with my card, paid with a tip, as always. There was something almost sentimental about this ritual. I genuinely thought I was welcome there, that people would appreciate me, that I'd come back and be the guy who kept the department afloat. I even looked, shall we say, decent. New jacket, pants with arrows. I even wore a tie, which is rare. The lobby of our office smelled of plastic and cheap Christmas trees, as it always did. I went up to the fourth floor, walked into the kitchen and set the box on the table, opening it with pathos. Who missed me? I tossed, looking around the half-empty room. A couple people nodded. Someone smiled. The rest were on their phones or headphones. You know, this was the moment I first felt something was wrong. Not because of the people. It was the silence, the way it sounded in my ears. I walked to my desk. The computer turned on, a little delayed as always. A notification popped up on the screen. Meeting with Brian Keller. 10 o'clock. Office 5. B. No subject, no description, no reason. It was 9:07 on the clock. I chuckled. Well, I guess it's probably just, I'm back, let's discuss the workload. Well, maybe he'll thank me. Maybe he'll give me a mug with the logo on it. After all, 19 years in the company is no joke. I've been here since we had the logo in Comic Sans. I've survived 3 CEOs, 2 moves, and 1 market crash. I once slept on a couch in a meeting room overnight to finish a report for a Seattle client. I once saved an $800,000 deal just in time to fill in for a sick manager. But who's counting them, right? I got up properly 5 minutes before the meeting. As I walked down the hall, I could already feel the air was thicker. Thicker. It was like the walls were watching. Or maybe I was starting to hear my own footsteps too clearly. Brian was sitting at a glass table, like a statue from IKEA. He was wearing his standard suit, his face emotionless. He didn't even offer a seat, just pointed with his hand. I sat down, and then he said it. No introductions, no mental movement. John, we have to say goodbye to you. The company is streamlining its structure. You've been hit with a wave of layoffs. That's it. Pause. No thank you for your years. No sorry, but we have to. Just goodbye. I blinked, twice, stared into his face and tried to find a shred of compassion there. Zero, not a muscle. Wait. I just got out of surgery. I was in the hospital. I mouthed it like he didn't know. Yeah, we know, but it had nothing to do with that. This decision was necessary. Business is business. Oh, how I hate that phrase now. Business is business. It's like it's a magic eraser that can be used to erase 19 years of my life. Like I wasn't a person, but an office chair that was time to throw away because the backrest was squeaking. I wanted to say something. I wanted to ask, why me? I wanted to remind him how I pulled the Davis project when it failed. I just wanted to hear something human, goddammit. But instead I nodded. He handed me a white envelope. It's everything you need. Sign at the front desk. Turn in your pass and laptop. Thanks, John. Thank you, John. There you go. For the coffee, for the sleepless nights, for the deals, for the nerves, for coming into work with a fever. Thank you, John. I walked out of the office, like I was wearing absorbent cotton, walked like a ghost. I walked past workstations where people once sat with whom I'd laughed, argued, decided. Today, no one looked up, or didn't want to, or didn't dare, or did they already know? On my way out, I stopped at the door. I thought maybe I should leave something. A statement? A speech? An outburst of anger? But no, he just put his head down and walked to the car. You know what's ironic? I even stopped by that day to pick up a nice bag of coffee for Brian. Yeah, for him. Because it was his birthday the other day, and I stupidly thought, what if he's not celebrating with his family? Maybe a gesture of attention is all he needs. Oh, well, I got the business is business response. It's a good deal. In the parking lot, I sat in the car for another 20 minutes, turned on the air conditioner, turned it off. I tried to remember what had happened. I felt physically sick, like my skin had been peeled off. The silence around me cut my ears. People were passing by. Someone was smoking at the entrance. Someone was arguing on the phone. Life was going on. Mine coiled up. In one sentence. In one damn envelope. Then I opened the glove box. There was an old business card, Alex Harper, a lawyer we'd once crossed paths with at a union lecture. I didn't even listen then. I just went as a courtesy. But he sticks in my mind. Why? Because that day he said, if you were fired while you were sick, it's not optimization. It's a setup. I chuckled then. And now I picked up the phone and dialed the number. And each dial tone hit my chest like a hammer. I held that phone in my hand for almost a minute before I pressed the call. Inside, everything was spinning. Should I let go? Maybe I was overplaying my hand. And then one single evening popped into my head. January, winter, me with a temperature of 102 Fahrenheit, sitting at home remotely setting up a presentation for Brian because he had a PowerPoint hang-up. And he was telling everyone how he saved the project overnight. And now I'm replaying it? Alex answered on the fourth ring. His voice was confident, cheerful, like people who know what they're doing. I explained everything quickly, no bullshit, just the facts, the operation, the return, the envelope. Brian's voice on the recording. Did you record it? He asked. Smart watch, everything's in place. Then listen carefully, John. You didn't just get a cheeky lockout. The way you're describing it, that would be a labor code violation, especially if you had a sick leave clause in your contract. Do you have a copy? I stood up straight in the car, opened the trunk, pulled out an old folder. I kept everything in there. Copies of contracts, tax papers, even drafts of old briefs. And of course, the signed original contract, with that very clause about protection in case of temporary disability. Got it, I said. And it's not just paper. It's my guarantee. Then keep it as a ticket to court, Alex replied. I'll meet you tomorrow. I'll start the case with you. I turned off the call and sat staring out the front window for a long time. The parking lot was emptying before my eyes. I saw my reflection in the windshield, a man with graying temples, tired, with sweat stains under his collar. But the eyes were different, as if someone inside had finally woken up. I came home late that evening. No TV, no music, just a dim light over the kitchen table. I laid out the contract in front of me, turned on the clock recording, opened my laptop, and started writing. Not a social media post, not a complaint. A letter to myself, about everything that had happened, about every moment I believed I belonged here forever. Every night I stayed up late because I had to. Every time I turned down a vacation to cover the department. I wrote until I realized that Brian's words no longer made me angry. They don't even hurt. They are emptiness. They're proof that someone can look you in the eye and erase 19 years with a click. But if you don't say anything, you're giving consent. And I wasn't going to keep quiet. And you know what's ironic? When I hit save, the laptop froze. For a second, it froze, like it was thinking. And then the file came up under the name Beginning One. Coincidence? Maybe. But it was the first time I ever smiled. What happened next changed everything. You don't want to miss how it unfolded. The next morning I woke up earlier than usual, at 5:47, as if my body had set off an internal alarm clock. The light in the bedroom was still dim, the sky was gray outside the window, but everything was burning inside. I felt like my spine had been taken out of me along with my confidence. The first thing I did was turn on my laptop. Not social media, not YouTube, not email. I opened a folder of archives, a folder I'd kept almost automatically over the last few years. Thank you notes from clients, minutes from meetings where I'd made suggestions, and even screenshots of chats where I'd been asked to save a report at the last minute. Back then, I didn't think about why I was saving. I just did. Now it was my shield. I scrolled through messages from lawyers, from the team, from clients. Some had already left, some quit, some stayed. But almost every email had words like, "We couldn't have done it without you," or "You were key to the deal." And the more I read, the more the question boiled up inside me. How could you take all of this and erase it all in one day? I went back to the tape, listened to Brian's voice, or phrase by phrase, how he calmly, without a hitch, delivered this optimization. It was like I was expendable, like a battery that had run out of charge. And then I realized it's not personal, it's worse, it's systemic. I opened up LinkedIn, started looking at who else had resigned in recent months. One, two, three, some with medical breaks, some with disabled children. It all became too similar, too familiar. I called Alex. He was already waiting. His voice was calm, businesslike. "John, bring everything, any correspondence, internal emails, copies of contracts, anything that shows you weren't just one of them, but essential." I was at his place in an hour. It was just a regular office, nothing fancy. Smelled like paper and coffee. Alex met me in a shirt with sleeves rolled up, behind a desk littered with files. I laid out my materials. He didn't interrupt, just nodded. And then he looked up and said, "We don't have a complaint. We have a case, and it's a big one. If you're ready, we'll go all the way." We sat in his office for over 3 hours. Alex asked questions, dug through dates, asked me to print out some letters and to highlight my role in the project separately. I was shocked at how easy the puzzle was to put together. My story isn't the only one, just one of the most neatly documented. Alex pulled out a clipboard and started showing me excerpts of federal regulations. I'm not a lawyer, but it was clear even to me. Firing someone after a medical excuse without warning, with access removed within 24 hours is not optimization. It's a violation. While he was talking, I remembered Brian's toast at the last company party about family culture and believing in every member of the team. He was probably already planning who he was going to throw the hell out, probably between a glass of wine and ordering dessert. "John," Alex said, putting down his pen, "I don't make empty promises, but you have a solid evidence base, and this tape, it could be the key." I nodded. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt tired. It was as if everything inside had been burned away, and there was only an ashtray of the debris of loyalty left. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth, and that it wouldn't happen to anyone else. As I walked out of the office, the sky darkened. It was raining, but I didn't hide. I walked to my car, soaked to the skin, and every step said one thing: "You're still standing. You didn't leave in silence." I spent the next 24 hours behind a monitor. No TV, no music. I drank tea without even noticing the taste. I went through my own archive, folders with projects, attachments, reviews, screenshots. I wrote down all the times I'd filled in for colleagues, when I'd stayed the longest, when I'd taken on the wrong section. It came out that I had backed up the department more than a dozen times, always voluntarily, no complaints. And now I was an extra. I made a spreadsheet. In one column, years. In another, key projects. Third column, client testimonials. Fourth column, instances where Brian or the partners thanked me personally. It used to be, "John, we couldn't have done it without you. You saved our presentation. Proud to have you on the team." Now it's not even, "I'm sorry." But the scary thing is, I wasn't the only one. I texted a former coworker, Cynthia. She left a couple months ago, for family reasons. Turns out she had surgery too. And almost immediately afterward, a termination notice. Same style, same formulaic phrases, same silence. Then I texted Vince, old manager, veteran. He served in Iraq, then came back and worked for us for over a decade. He was downsized after he admitted he was having panic attacks. Same old wording, restructuring. My hands were shaking, not out of anger. It was the feeling that everything I believed in was a sham, that you could be dedicated, diligent, polite, and still end up under the bus. Not because of a mistake, not because of a conflict, just because you became uncomfortable. The next day I met up with Alex again. Not alone this time. I brought Cynthia with me. At first, she was reluctant, saying she didn't want a scandal. Then she just opened her phone and showed me the letter. Thank you for your loyalty, but the company is changing direction. Same style, same signature, same deadline, a week after she got off sick leave. Alex looked at her carefully, nodded, and said, "You're not the first, but if you agree to join us, we can take things to another level." Cynthia was silent. Then she exhaled. "I've lost everything. Let's do something so others don't have to go through this." I looked at her and realized, if a grown, strong person who has held the department together for years is now saying this, then things really are out of bounds. This isn't about me anymore. It's about all of us. We spent the rest of the day in a small co-working space. Alex hooked up an assistant, pulled up some documents, started preparing a strategy. It felt like we were building a case that wasn't just personal, it was exemplary. Late that evening, I sat in my house and listened to the tape again. "Brian, you were in the hospital, but it had nothing to do with that." His smooth voice, his confidence that he was in control, his office, his suit, his envelope. Only one thing he hadn't taken into account. I wasn't going to forget. I pressed stop, and for the first time I said it out loud. I'm not going to let this disappear. On the third day, I published a short post. No names, no titles. Just 19 years of work, operation, return, envelope. No words, no goodbye, but a recording. If you've had something similar happen to you, write in private. The post went viral, hundreds of reposts. People started sharing stories, not just from my company, everywhere. Teachers, doctors, technicians, veterans, people who were laid off at a time when they were most vulnerable, and everyone had the same phrase. It was unexpected. It was like I became invisible. I read every message, some 3 times each. I wrote down names, dates, circumstances. Alex said that from this data, we could build a case against the system. I said I wanted it to start with one simple question. Why? Why isn't anyone ashamed to fire the people who carried the company through the tough years? Why are decisions made behind the scenes and explanations in an envelope? I went to Alex's office again in the morning. He met me with a serious face. "Are you ready?" "No," I answered. "But it doesn't matter, I'm going." When you lose everything, the fear goes away too. All that's left is the feeling that if you don't get up now, you won't get up later. That night I found an old note in the drawer. It was written in my son's hand. "Dad, thank you for always being there for me, even when you have an important job." I held the note and realized that this was worth fighting for, so that my son would someday know that his father didn't keep silent. He didn't. He stayed the course even when it was scary. I'm not a hero. I'm just a man who was struck out, thinking he wouldn't dare stand up. But now I stood up, not for revenge, for memory, for justice, for the sake of those who come after. When I closed the laptop, it was unexpectedly quiet, not the silence of powerlessness. It was the silence before the step that changes everything. I turned off the light, and for the first time in days, I went to bed not with anxiety, but with determination. This is the climax. Everything you've been waiting for is right here. Stay to see the hero put everyone in their place. I didn't know what was going to happen next, and who knows. But I knew for sure that there was no turning back. When I left the house this morning, the street smelled different. Not because the season had changed, it was because inside I had changed. I walked into Alex's office. He was already waiting. Papers were laid out, a pen was laid out for his signature, and I could feel the tension in the air. Not panic, anticipation, like in the gym before you go to a fight. You know what you're in for, but your body still gives off an anxious vibe. "John, they've responded," Alex began, "through outside counsel. It's textbook. No admission of guilt, reasonable restructuring, in accordance with company policy. Except you know what?" He turned to the laptop. "They started cleaning up their tracks, deleted the internal orders for that day, changed the termination notice template. Most importantly, they archived your corporate emails. It was like you never existed." I exhaled, slowly, deeply. This isn't just meanness. This is digital murder. But we have the tape. We have the emails. Colleagues are with us, and we're going to court. I nodded. Let's go. We had a hearing ahead of us. We'd been preparing the case for a week. Interrogations, chronology, evidence. We found three others who were fired in a similar pattern. One was a man with a chronic illness. The second was a woman who'd recently given birth. The third was an older analyst with 22 years on the job. They're all a match. Same structure, same signatures, same coincidences. The hearing was scheduled for Tuesday. I showed up in a suit and tie that my son had given me last Christmas and a look on my face like I was about to bury 19 years of my life. Because in fact, that's exactly what I was doing. The courtroom hallway was crowded. Reporters, staffers, former coworkers. I saw some of them avert their eyes and some of them came over and shook my hand. "You're doing the right thing," said one of the IT guys I'd saved the server from on Friday night. "Thank you," I exhaled and stepped inside. The judge was stern, unemotional. The company representatives, expensive suits, hard faces. They brought stacks of papers as if they were trying to drown the truth under pounds of stationery. Alex sat next to them, calm, focused. He began to speak, and it was as if the whole room froze. "We're not here because John Riley was fired. We're here because John Riley was tried to be erased. First out of the system, then out of memory." I felt the blood rush to my temples. Excitement? Rage? From the feeling that now my voice would be heard. Alex read the paragraphs. Testimony, screens, chronology. Then he put it on tape. Brian's voice was muffled but distinct. "We know you were in the hospital. This has nothing to do with that." The judge raised his eyebrows. "I request a record," Alex said. "Dismissal of the person in recovery, subject to a protective clause in the contract, with simultaneous removal of access and systemic cleanup of traces." "Sustained," the judge replied. The company tried to argue. Their lawyer talked about restructuring, budget problems, reorganization. But the records, witnesses, documents, everything spoke against it. I sat down on the bench and looked out at the gallery. Cynthia was next to me. Vince a little farther away. I could see them clenching their fists. Because for each of us, this wasn't just a case. It was an attempt to reclaim a name. The trial lasted 3 days. On the second day, Cynthia took the stand. Her voice was shaking, but her words were clear. "I quit because I was fired while I was breastfeeding my baby. I got a call that the department was disbanded. I said, 'Why wasn't I told?' And they said, 'It just happened.'" She finished, and there was silence. Then Vince was called in. He silently put his military badge and the therapist's printout on the table. "I was told, 'You're burned out. Get some rest.'" 3 days later, a discharge notice. He didn't ask for sympathy. He just stood there, and silent. And there was more pain in that silence than all the words. On the third day, it was my turn. I came out, stood in front of the judge, looked him straight in the eye. "I don't want to complain. I'm not looking for compensation for money. I'm here because I've never taken a sick day in 19 years, because I've helped everyone who asked, because I went to work even when I was in a cast, and now I'm a number in the optimization line." The judge looked at me closely, didn't interrupt, didn't nod, just listened. "I'm not alone. There are hundreds like me. You get sick, you get fired. You give birth, they cut you out. You get tired, they replace you. We've become expendable, and I want that to change." When I got back to my seat, I didn't feel fear anymore. There was only fatigue and a clear feeling that I'd said everything. An hour later, the judge ruled. Fraser and Company is found guilty of discriminatory discharge, compensation to be paid, access to records to be restored, in an internal investigation to be conducted. The room froze, and then applause. Not loud, not theatrical, just sincere. I didn't smile. I just looked forward, because I knew this wasn't the end, but it was definitely the beginning of something new. 2 days after the trial, I got a call, not from a lawyer, not the press. It was a former intern, Jason, the same guy I once helped with my first client report. "Minus Mr. Riley, thank you for not being afraid. Everyone in the department is talking about it. You gave us a voice." Then there was the press, letters, messages from former colleagues. Some thanked us, some apologized. One even wrote, I'm sorry I kept quiet when you were fired. I was afraid for my position. I wasn't angry. I understood. We've all been silent at some point. A week later, the company was audited. Several managers were suspended. Internal emails surfaced. Anonymous sources confirmed the layoffs were pre-planned for medical cases to mitigate insurance risks. Brian, he resigned. No speech, no goodbye. His name disappeared from the site overnight, pretty much the same way they tried to erase mine. What about me? I started a podcast, no joke. Once a week, I told the stories of ordinary people who were trying to be optimized. People wrote, called, shared. I felt like it wasn't all for nothing. But most importantly, I came home as a person, not as a lawyer, not as a file, but as a father, a husband, a citizen. I looked in the mirror again and saw not fear, not confusion, but calm. One day my son came up to me, holding that very tie. "You still wear it, don't you?" "Of course I do," I smiled, "especially when I know that ahead, not a surrender, but a step forward." I've often thought about the day I got fired. And no, not because it hurt, but because it was the day I stopped believing in loyalty as armor. I realized you can be loyal, but if the system is rotten, it will eat even the best. And that's when you decide, walk away in silence or stand up. I chose to stand up. Now looking back, I don't feel angry, only clarity. I see how slowly I've changed myself. From a confused office worker to a man who finally said, enough is enough. And you know, if I could turn back time, I'd still go to court. I'd do it again. Just not for me anymore. Because when you tell the truth, it doesn't go away. It can be uncomfortable, loud, even dangerous, but it will always be necessary. And sometimes it's the only right thing to say. When you work for decades, you think your story will stay in the company hallways, that your voice is in the meetings, that your actions are in the team's memory. But the truth is that the memory of companies is short, and history isn't written by them. It's written by us. Those who didn't go quietly, the ones who stepped forward. And if one day someone else receives the same envelope, I want them to know they are not alone. Not anymore. Because even after a 30-second layoff, you can get your name back, and a voice, and dignity. If you've read to the end, you know the importance of not being silent. Sign up and be with us in this fight for justice. This isn't a finale, it's a new chapter.